All of the transient is parable only, insufficient. Here grows to reality. The indescribable here is done. Woman eternal beckons us on. Hello and welcome to a new video. In this video I will tell you something about Faust, Prometheus, and a little bit about Epimetheus. And it's really about telling you a story of a coming together of two opposing worlds. So, starting off, Faust. Who is he? Well, he's a symbol of the man ever striving for more knowledge and control over the natural world. You know, and Goethe's Faust isn't also, of course, the story of a man who makes a deal with the devil in exchange for all the knowledge and pleasure in the world. And Goethe's Faust is considered to be the greatest work of German literature. And one prominent figure really influenced by that character was also Nietzsche. And Nietzsche also wrote a little bit is an understatement, wrote quite a bit regarding this in Beyond Good, or Nietzsche wrote something regarding this in this Spake Zarathustra. So now, Faust, one can really contrast here with Socrates. In a sense, they are presented here as the Alpha and the Omega by Nietzsche. Respectively of the type we might call the man of knowledge. And Nietzsche says that Faust would have been so different from the Socratic outlook that he would be he would be someone that would not be it would be unintelligible to a Greek. Basically, that's what Nietzsche said. Now you might think why am I not talking about Faust, Prometheus, and why am I gonna talk about Epimetheus? Well, in a way, really, it's about the story of the modern world and its final climax point, like that where it all like is going towards. The different paths that lie from that, either going fully towards the nature side, or like and pushing away logos, or like going full logos and pushing away the nature side, and yeah, where and like yeah, the path forward, the path forward really, like with regards to the age of Aquarius. So now like yeah, so like and yeah, the modern world being like a Faustian world. So that's why yeah that I'm bringing in Faust here. And now bringing it completely back to Socrates, like to the beginning of like that this world started to like take shape. Well, so for Socrates, the theoretical outlook was a promise and a way to the good life. It was the beautiful dim glow at the sunset of Hellenic culture, and the story of Faust really tells one about the limits of that theoretical outlook. And it's about the Alexandrian zeitgeist that has swept over the modern world thousands of years later, that we're living in now. And Faust is then for Nietzsche a bridge from the limitations of knowledge and theory and the eventual dissatisfaction. Like he searches for an end to knowledge, for the zenith of human happiness, yearning for a coast in the wide waste of the ocean of knowledge. And at the end of the at the end of this passage, Nietzsche raises the idea of the non-theorist, which he says is incredible to the modern man. Because we have Socrates and Faust standing for the beginning and the end for the theoretical approach to life, as progenitor and surpasser. And it's really the story of Logos, really, like beginning with Socrates, the coming of Christ, and now the Logos has fallen into the world of the material. And now it has become part of the material, like science, which is like the Christian world put into the stripped away from anything spiritual, put into the material world, with any story or anything else stripped from it. So now, as to the story of Faust. So in the first part, the demon Mephistopheles makes a bet with God. He says that he can lure God's favorite human being, that's Faust, who's striving to learn everything that can be known away from righteous pursuits. And then the next scene takes place in Faust's study, where Faust, despairing at the vanity of scientific, humanistic and religious learning, turns to magic for the showering of infinite knowledge. And Faust ends up making an arrangement with Mephistopheles that he will do everything that Faust That like, so Mephistopheles will do everything that Faust wants while he is here on Earth, and in exchange, Faust will serve the devil in hell. And Faust's arrangement is that if he is pleased enough with anything Mephistopheles gives him, that he wants to stay in that moment forever, then he will die in that moment. And his soul goes to the devil. In the second part, Faust enters the realm of the mothers, and it's variously described as the depths of the psyche or the womb. And it really had to do with the ideal form. And the ideal form of beauty. And in this case, the ideal forms in the play were depicted as Helen of Troy and her lover Paris. And Faust then summons their spirits from Hades, so from the underworld. And then, but what ends up happening is that the emperor and the male members of the court then criticize Paris' appearance, while the women of the court criticize Helen's appearance. But Faust falls in love with Helen. Then after that, an artificial human being created by Faust's former servant, which this artificial human being being created by the means of an alchemical process leads Faust and Mephistopheles to the classical Walpurgisnacht, which is like which is really a night in which in which nature spirits come to drive away the evil spirits of the winter. And but in the case of this of the story of Faust, they encounter gods and monsters from Greek antiquity. And then Faust, still searching for Helen, is then led by the Sibyl Manto into the underworld. So you have here the encounter with all of the gods and the monsters on the edge. And then he goes into the underworld. Now he's been in contact with like Helen, and he wants to go after her. Is quite close to like the Jungian idea of regarding like when you start the anima work. It's the encounter, then on that what lies on the edge, and going into the underworld to go to her, to find her. Then the third act begins with Helen's arrival at the palace of Menelaus in Sparta. And then the hideous Porcias, and the Porcias being one of the three witches that like share a tooth and an eye between them. She appears at the hearth, or the hearth, and the fireplace, and warns Helen that Menelaus means to sacrifice her and her attendants. Then, distraught at this new knowledge, Helen implores Porcias, so the witch, to save them. Porcias then transports Helen to Faust's fortress, where Helen and Faust declare their love for each other. Then Porcias, now Faustus and Helen's attendant, explains to the newly woken chorus that during the past interval, Faust and Helen have had a spirited son named Euphorion, who charms all with his beauty and gift for music. And then also about the news that the wild Euphorion, becoming increasingly bold in his flight, falls to his death, which was an allusion to Icarus, whereupon the sorrowful Helen disappears in the mist to Hades, an allusion to the legend of Orpheus. As the act ends, Porcius is revealed to be Mephistopheles in disguise. So the demon after all. Thereafter, in this story, Faust doesn't continue with what you could say, like going back into the underworld and continue that journey, but he states a new higher purpose, and that's that he wants to reclaim new land. Behind this, his desire stands the idea to control the elements or even to submit nature. So to make the feminine aspects submit to his will. And subsequently, Faust then focuses on controlling the sea, from which he reclaims new ground by dams and drainage ditches. So he's like the Dutch building dikes and reclaiming land from the sea. Then an indefinite interval of time then has passed within the story since the end of the previous act, and Faust is now an old but powerful man favored by the king. And he succeeded reclaiming the land from the sea. And Faust has built a castle on this reclaimed land. And upon seeing the hut of an old peasant couple, Baucis and Philemon, in a nearby chapel, Faust becomes irritated that these two structures do not belong to him. Because he wants to own everything. And orders to have them removed. Mephistopheles overinterprets this, however, these orders from Faust, and he ends up murdering the old couple. And then the personification of care then breathes upon Faust's eyes, and he becomes blind. Upon disclosing his plans to better the lives of his subjects, motivated perhaps out of guilt, he recognizes the moment of sheer bliss which he would seek to prolong and drops dead. Mephistopheles believes Faust had lost his wager and tries to claim his soul. Angels then suddenly appear, dropping rose petals on the demons who flee from the burning petals. And then the angels bearing Faust's soul appear in heaven. After the enraptured doctor, the eternal feminine, the Virgin Mary, appears from on high. So she's just coming down towards him, and three biblical holy women in the play plea for Faust's soul, and it is granted by the Virgin Mary in the story. And an interesting fact here is that the predecessor of Faustus in Christian mythology is Theophilus, friend of God, or beloved of God. That's what his name means. The unhappy and despairing cleric, disappointed in his worldly career by his bishop, who sells his soul to the devil but is redeemed by the Virgin Mary. You can really see it like that like it's something that was already approaching, like that Faustian world. But what I want to bring in here is the part of Epimetheus. There is an alternative to this Faustian world, where Prometheus and Faust looks forward and look towards like conquering the material world, Epimetheus looks backwards. He looks back in time, making him perhaps the god of the retrospective. And it's in this agile age that we live in that I do think that we need to remember the value of this forgotten sibling and return the skills related to looking inward and backward into history and myth. Not like Faust was just going after it. He was led into the underworld, but he didn't continue going inward. That's one important factor here. But there's more to this, and it's where I want to bring up a part from chapter 7 of The Schooling Society by Ivan Illich. And he writes, the original Pandora, the All-Giver, was an earth goddess in prehistoric matriarchal Greece. She let all ills escape from her amphora, but she closed the lid before hope could escape. The history of modern man begins with the degradation of Pandora's myth and comes to an end in the self-sealing casket. It is the history of the Promethean endeavor to forge institutions in order to corral each of the rampant ills. It is the history of fading hope and rising expectations. To understand what this means, we must rediscover the distinction between hope and expectation. Hope, in its strongest sense, means trusting faith in the goodness of nature, while expectation really being really meaning reliance on results which are planned and controlled by man. The Greeks told the story of two brothers, Prometheus and Epimetheus. The former warned the latter to leave Pandora alone. Instead, Epimetheus married her. Prometheus is, usually thought to mean foresight, or sometimes even he who makes the North Star progress. He tricked the gods out of their monopoly of fire, taught the man to use it in the forging of iron, became the god of the technologists, and wound up in iron chains. But by the time Hesiod retold the story in its classical form, the Greeks had built a rational society. Men had engineered institutions through which they planned to cope with the rampant ills that Pandora let escape. They became conscious of their power to fashion the world and make it produce services they also learned to expect. They wanted their own needs and the future demands of their children to be shaped by their artifacts. They became lawgivers, architects, and authors, the makers of constitutions, cities, and works of art, to serve as examples for their offspring. Contrasting to this, primitive man had relied on mythical participation in sacred rites to initiate individuals into the lore of society, often taking the shape of like an inward journey, something along the lines of individuation. Where modern man uses institutions to shape the person to fit within society itself. And that is where I think a new path could come in, one in which the Faustian and Promethean man, as this story suggests, would come together with the Epimethean man. And in the stories, it is the son of the Promethean man and daughter of the Epimethean man but when they come together, form this new path in which both are brought into some form of harmony. And in the old account of the Greeks, it was Prometheus that told his son Deucalion to build an ark, and told him of an incoming flood. This is then related to the ancient flood myths. So that when the waters would recede after 9 days, he and his wife, Pyrrha, daughter of Epimetheus, then would become the surviving pair of humans. So once the flood was over, Deucalion then consulted an oracle of Themis about how to repopulate the earth. And he was told to cover his head and throw the bones of his mother behind his shoulder. And Deucalion and Pyrrha understood that mother is Gaia, the mother of all living things, and the bones to be rocks. So they threw rocks behind their shoulders, and the stones then formed people. And then their offspring then became all kinds of different people within the story, then within Greece. The different types of people. Yeah, here both paths then, like you can see, we're wed to each other to form a new path leading into a new age. It's those apocalypse stories. It's those apocalypse stories that really speak about that. Like with Ragnarok, the dying of the of most of the old gods, and then the forming of something new. The flood in the time of Deucalion was caused by the anger of Zeus, ignited by the hubris of Lycaon and his sons. According to that story, Lycaon, the king of Arcadia, sacrificed a boy to Zeus, just to see how far he could, how far he could go. If Zeus was really all-knowing. Zeus, who was appalled by this offering, then decided to put an end to that age by unleashing a flood. And an interesting fact here that I want to bring up is that the old Greek author Hyginus mentions that Deucalion is to be identified with Aquarius. And it is in these stories about really about bringing together the Faustian and Promethean intellect side with the Epimethean and Pandora, so Gaian related, natural, instinctive, emotional, and creative side. So both Logos and Eros come together in a form of union. It's like with Faust, eventually the feminine still swooped in to save him, even though he had in the story died and went to heaven. In that sense, in the Jungian sense, the ego dies and surrenders and is rebuilt together with the archetype of the self. So really looking at now the modern world, I think something like this would require an understanding of the modern world of Prometheus, whilst marrying it with a rediscovery of the ways of the so-called primitive man who relied on mythical courtesy, patient and sacred rites to initiate individuals into the lore of society. And basically to rediscover the ancient animistic and paths, whilst not throwing away the lessons we have learned throughout all of the ages that came before us, and to look back throughout those ages, really, and to do that before we can go forward.